What if I tell you John opens the book of Revelation with a warning not to read the book of Revelation looking for charts and timelines and codes? At the very beginning of the book, he says that this book was made known. And the Greek word there is eseimanen. That word comes from the word seimino, and it means to signify and to reveal by sign. So Revelation is not a book about headlines from the future. It's a book about symbols. God didn't just tell John what would happen, he showed him through vivid prophetic imagery. And that single word, seimino, tells you how to read everything that follows in the book. And it's the opposite of what a lot of people think. This video is going to focus in on how it communicates that message. Look at Revelation 1:1. It says, the revelation of Jesus Christ that God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. He made it known, eseimanen, by sending his angel to his servant John. That phrase, he made it known, is actually crucial. It's the same Greek verb used in Daniel chapter 2 in the ancient Greek translation of the Bible or of the Old Testament, the Septuagint. Right here's a copy of the Septuagint. King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon has a dream. He sees a statue in this dream made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay. And no one can interpret this dream or what it means. Now, you can read the story for yourself if you're not familiar, but Nebuchadnezzar doesn't even tell anyone what the dream is. He wants whoever interprets it to be able to know what it is without him telling them, because that's how he knows they're true and they're getting a real interpretation. Enter Daniel into the story. Daniel prays in the story. God reveals to him the dream and the meaning of the dream. And in Daniel 2:45, it says this: the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. That is Hotheos eseimanen tova sile. You'll notice that word eseimanen in there. It was made known to Nebuchadnezzar. Well, in Daniel, God signified or made known the meaning through symbol. A statue that represented successive empires. Gold was Babylon. Silver was Medo-Persia. Bronze was Greece. Iron and clay were Rome. Each element was a picture. The dream wasn't literal metals. It was symbolic imagery. So when John uses this same verb in Revelation 1:1, in the same form, in the same way that Daniel does, he's deliberately linking his vision back to Daniel. And we can see this because Revelation, it not only uses it in that same form, in the same way Daniel does, but Daniel talks about Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, and so does Revelation. It talks about Babylon. Daniel talks about beasts from the sea. So does Revelation. It's intentionally borrowing from Daniel. In this verse, he's saying God is revealing these realities the same way he did to Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel, through signs and images. G.K. Bill, in his commentary on the book of Revelation, says this: John's use of seimino deliberately alludes to Daniel 2:45 in the Septuagint, indicating that the revelations to follow, like Daniel's, are conveyed through symbolic visions. So Revelation was never meant to read like a newspaper. It was written in the symbolic grammar of apocalyptic prophecy, the same way Daniel was centuries earlier. Now pause for a second and think about that. If Daniel's metal statue represented entire kingdoms and nations, then Revelation's beasts and bowls and dragons are not literal either. They're symbols of political and spiritual reality. Craig Keener, in his Revelation commentary, says this: apocalyptic symbolism was designed to reveal divine truth, not obscure it. It unveils how heaven sees the powers of earth. John's visions work this way. Every picture reveals what words can't hold. Richard Bauckham says in the Theology of the Book of Revelation, apocalyptic imagery makes visible the spiritual reality that stands behind the appearances of the world. That's the key. These signs aren't riddles. They pull back the curtain so you can see the throne behind history. If you really want to dig deep in understanding the Bible, you have to read it in context. If you're interested, I have a free PDF that breaks down 7 different types of context that are important. If you're interested in that, there's a link down in the description. You can click that. It's a free resource, no cost to you. So if you're interested, click that and get that PDF. Now back to the right in Revelation for Everyone says this: John isn't inventing fantasy. He's describing reality in the only language capable of bearing it, the language of symbol. So when Revelation shows beasts, it's actually showing empire. When it shows a dragon, it's showing the spiritual force of evil. When it shows a woman clothed with the sun, it's showing God's people in glory and travail. The symbols are the message. Apocalyptic literature was familiar to first century Jews. They read books like Daniel, Ezekiel, Zechariah, and 1st Enoch. All of those books used apocalyptic imagery to portray God's rule over creation when life felt chaotic. When persecution made direct political criticism dangerous, writers used symbols, beasts, horns, mountains, to speak truth under empire. John inherits that language, but baptizes it in Christ. Richard Bauckham explains, Revelation unmasks the powers of the world by showing them from the perspective of heaven. So when John says Babylon, his readers in Asia Minor understood that to be Rome. When he says the beast, they know it means imperial power, claiming to be divine. They don't need a decoder ring. They already know the code. Those 7 churches, Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea, they lived under Domitian, who demanded to be called Lord and God. They were pressured to worship Caesar and to join pagan guild feast to honor him. John writes to open their eyes. Rome looks glorious, but heaven sees a beast. Early Christians understood this perfectly. Victorinus of Patau says, in the apocalypse, all things are shown in visions and signs, not in the plainness of words. Origen in On First Principles says, divine mysteries are veiled in figures, that those who love the truth may search them out. And Irenaeus in Against Heresies says, if it had been necessary to know the name of the beast, it would have been told by him who saw the apocalypse. For them, Revelation wasn't an encrypted message for the end. It was a pastoral letter calling the church to discernment. Now notice how this pattern runs straight from Daniel to John. In Daniel 7, beasts represent kingdoms. In Daniel 2, metals represent empires. In Revelation, John reuses those same images, but now they're centered on Christ. G.K. Bill says, John's reuse of Daniel's imagery shows that the same historical forces are now fulfilled and transformed in the Messiah. Rome becomes the new Babylon. The faithful church becomes the true Israel. The Lamb becomes the final Son of Man. Every empire that exalts itself repeats Babylon's story, and every faithful witness repeats Daniel. If you read Revelation literally, you're going to be looking for beast, this statue, a talking statue, right? You're going to look for these things on the news. But if you read it symbolically, which is what Revelation 1:1 says we are supposed to do, then you'll look for beasts in your culture, the systems that demand ultimate loyalty. The message isn't decode and escape, it's see and remain faithful. N.T. Wright says, Revelation is a summons to worship, to refuse the idols of empire and to adore the Lamb. That's what the 7 churches needed then, and that's what we need now. When your faith costs you comfort, Revelation reminds you the Lamb still reigns. When you feel overwhelmed by the world's chaos, Revelation reminds you the throne is not empty. And as Origen observed, wars also take place within the soul. Every believer faces the pull between the beast and the lamb. But John's title tells you the purpose, the revelation, apocalypsis of Jesus Christ. That word apocalypsis means an unveiling.
And you will often see it shooting out like beams of light. I've seen what I think are angels coming out of it. Another lady commented and said that her 5-year-old daughter pointed up to the sky and said that she could see God's eye. It's on every single camera, you guys, and I watch these all the time. I have never seen this prior to a month or two ago. Again, you can see the light coming out of it. Like, what is this? It's on every single camera. And I saw it in person as well.
There is a scroll mentioned in the book of Revelation that almost no one talks about. Not your pastor. not most prophecy teachers, not even the scholars who spend their lives studying end times. This scroll holds the key to understanding Satan's final deception, the greatest lie ever told, the one that will deceive nations, kings, and even those who thought they could never be fooled. And tonight, we're breaking the seal. Welcome to Mysteries Behind the Scroll. I'm your guide through the hidden wisdom of Scripture, and what you're about to discover will change the way you read Revelation forever. Because buried within the prophetic text is a warning so profound, so urgent, that the early church fathers whispered about it in secret. Ancient Jewish writings hinted at it. And today, in our generation, the pieces are finally coming together. The question is, are you ready to see it? Let's begin. In Revelation chapter 5, John describes a vision that should terrify us and captivate us in equal measure. He sees a scroll in the right hand of God, sealed with 7 seals, and a mighty angel proclaims with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" John writes, "No one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it." And he wept bitterly. Think about that moment. The Apostle John, who had walked with Jesus, who had seen miracles, who had witnessed the resurrection, weeping because this scroll could not be opened. Why? Because this wasn't just any scroll. Many scholars believe this scroll contained the full revelation of God's final plan, the judgments, the redemption, the unveiling of all hidden things. But it also contained something else, something the enemy desperately wanted to keep sealed, the exposure of his final deception. Now here's where it becomes shocking. The Lion of Judah, Jesus Christ, steps forward as the only one worthy to open the scroll. And as he breaks each seal, judgment after judgment is released upon the earth. But here's what most people miss. The scroll isn't just about what happens. It's about what's revealed. Each seal that breaks exposes a layer of deception that has been operating in the shadows since the garden. And by the time the 7th seal is broken, the full picture becomes clear. The final deception isn't something that's coming. It's already unfolding. And the scroll? It's the divine blueprint that exposes it. Let me take you deeper. In ancient Jewish tradition, scrolls were more than documents. They were sacred vessels of truth. When a scroll was sealed, it meant the knowledge inside was protected, preserved for the right time and the right person. The book of Daniel mentions a scroll that would be sealed until the time of the end, when knowledge would increase and many would run to and fro. Daniel chapter 12 verse 4. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. The time of the end, not the end itself, but the season leading up to it. The time when the seals would begin to break, when hidden things would be brought into the light. And here's the part most Christians have never heard. The early church believed that this unsealing wasn't just a future event. They believed it was a process, a progressive revelation that would accelerate as history moved toward its climax. Which means we are living in the era of the opening scroll. Now, if you haven't already, I want you to pause after this video and watch some of the other mysteries we've uncovered on this channel.
Sam Hancock, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Hancock. Sam Hancock, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Hancock.